Hi everyone, if you're new, my name is Jen. Hello, I'm an author and a book reviewer, and today is a video where I hold myself accountable. And I've done this a couple of times where I've gone through a year of book hauls on this channel, because I've had this channel for, I think this is the 8th year that I have had it. So I've gone through a whole year of book hauls to see which books from that particular year I still haven't read. So this time we're going to go from October 2016 to September 2017, and I'm going to go through all of those videos. I won't subject that to you. There will just be short clips from that, and then I'm going to pull the books from my shelves that I haven't read, and depending on how many there are, because at this point I don't know, I'm going to then read the first chapters of each book. This tea is too hot to drink, and it's even too hot to warm my hands, so I'm putting it down. Depending on how many books there are, I'm going to read the first chapters of each one to see if I still want to read them, not because I want to clear books off my shelves. That's not the aim of this video. Just to kind of get a feel for them and see which ones I'm really looking forward to getting to, which ones maybe I'm not as excited to get to, or perhaps reading the first chapter has changed my opinion of that specific book. And maybe there will be a book or two that I read the beginning of and think, actually that's not what I expected at all, or maybe my tastes have changed since then. I don't know, we'll see. I don't know what's going to crop up. So I have my laptop in front of me. I'm going to go through those videos now, and then we can crack on. So this is kind of an elongated version of a try a chapter tag to try and work out if the books that I bought, when was this, 6 years ago, are still books that I would like to read today, and also see how many I have not yet read. This video is also very kindly sponsored by Skillshare. I'll talk about that later. All right, let me screen record. Okay, so we are starting with October 2016, and I don't think it's a surprise to anyone to see that I'm holding up a book by Ali Smith, which I definitely have read. In fact, going through all of the books in the description of this video, I have read every single book, 29 books from this particular book haul, and I have read all of them, so that's a fantastic start. November, and I'm holding up Jeanette Winterson's Christmas Days, which again, I have definitely read. In November, I hauled 27 books, and I only hadn't read one of them, and I'm holding up two books here, Coralie Bickford Smith's and Jeanette Winterson's Christmas Days, because the covers are suspiciously similar. I've actually made a video talking about why certain book covers look the same, and I'll link that up here and down below if you happen to be interested. All right. December. In December, I also bought 27 books, and I have also only not read one of them. So this is going better than anticipated. All right, January. In January, I hauled 10 books and haven't read 2 of them. Moving on to February, I used to wear this lipstick all the time. I think it's Rimmel 107, and in February I bought 16 books and haven't read one of them. March 2017, and I miss this flannel shirt. How does one lose a flannel shirt? It's not a sock, I don't understand, but I don't know where that went, and it was one of my favourite shirts, and it was so comfortable. You know, one of those items of clothing, the more you wash it, the softer it gets. I used to really love it. But anyway, in March 2017, I bought 16 books and haven't read 2 of them. I think maybe even wearing the same nail varnish as well. April 2017, sitting right by the window, wearing bright blue nail varnish again, but a lighter colour. I bought 17 books that month and haven't read 2 of them again. May, we are going up to 3. It's 3 books out of 13, which is interesting because it's the shortest number of books that I've mentioned so far, but the greatest number of unread books. June, and it looks like it must be really sunny. Do you remember the sun? Okay, in June I bought 16 books and hadn't read one of them. And can I just have a moment for this hairstyle, because I miss it. July, we have our highest number yet, 4 unread books. 4 out of 17. Again, one of the lowest number of books hauled, but the largest number of books unread. And don't worry, I am going to be, as I said, pulling them off my shelves and tell you what those books are and all of that. August, we are reunited with the flannel jumper that once was. I hope it's having a good life somewhere. Oh look, I'm holding up copies of the proofs of my short story collection, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. They must have just arrived when I was filming this, because that book came out in November of that year. So Look at me being a proud author and holding up my bookish offspring. All right, in August, I hauled 10 books and haven't read one of them. And finally, in September, oh, I'm being a proud author again and I'm holding up my other bookish child. So Franklin's Flying Bookshop also came out in the autumn of 2017. So I was promoting 2 books at once, which was a busy time. All right, in September 2017, I hauled 15 books and I hadn't read 2 of them. That works out as 20 books that I haven't read out of 213, which I'm very happy with, but let me go and pull those books off my shelf so that we can look at them closely. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video is very kindly sponsored by Skillshare. So while I raid my shelves, I'm going to insert a clip talking to you about that. Whilst I assemble a candle cottage thing, you will see when I do the cutaway. I showed you the January one before. I need to assemble the February one. I will link Morgan's website down below, which is where I purchased these printout calendars. I love them. I'll be back in a second. I've been working with Skillshare pretty much as long as I've had my channel because I think that what they do is great. They're an online learning community and they have thousands and thousands of classes on pretty much anything you could think of, from baking to interior design, productivity, building websites, Excel spreadsheets, just anything and everything. All of their classes are broken down into manageable chunks so you can fit them into your day. And they have community areas too if you want to chat with people who happen to be doing the class at the same time. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. All the classes are captioned. And I thought I would mention this one in particular because I get so many questions about productivity relating to freelance life or just life in general. And there is a class that they have called Mastering Productivity, Create a Custom System That Works by Thomas Frank, which is about maximizing the time you have, not necessarily to do more, but just to get things done more efficiently and just make you feel better about things. And we all like to feel better about things. So that's the one that I wanted to mention today. And as I have mentioned in previous videos, they do also have writing classes, including one by Roxanne Gay. So that is something that you might want to check out too. Skillshare have given me a link, which is right at the top of the description box down below. And the first 1,000 of you to click on that will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. So please do go and check that out. I was going to say, go tell them that I say hi, but that's a weird thing to say. You don't have to do that, but just go click on the link and check them out. They have so much to offer. You're definitely going to find something that is up your street. Thank you very much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Welcome back. You know what is a little bit unsettling about this project is that I feel that we've got to the stage where now I'm looking at books and thinking they haven't been sitting there for that long. But then it has been 6 years and it doesn't feel like 6 years, and that is starting to feel rather strange. So I have got these 20 books from my shelves that I haven't read from between October 2016 to September 2017. I'm not going to read the beginning of all 20. There are going to be some that I'm going to put to one side, but I will explain as we go. Okay, let me consult my notes. So in October 2016, I hauled 29 books, read all of them. In November, I hauled 27 books, and there's one I haven't read, and it's this one, which is brilliant. The Evolution of Artificial Light by Jane Brox. This is one of the ones I'm not going to be sampling from today because, like a couple of others in this pile, I bought this as a research book for writing. So I have gone into it a couple of times, dipped in and out of it, and that's kind of how I imagine my experience with this book will continue, that it won't be one that I sit down and just read cover to cover. So this one is going back on the shelf. Then in December 2016, again, it was 27 books, and again, it was one that I hadn't read. And this one is the one that I am perplexed by because I can't believe it's been 6 years. And this is The Sad Part Was by Prabda Yoon, translated from the Thai by Weeper Popsicle. And it's published by Tilted Axis Press, who I love. I've since read other books translated by this translator, including Dunwood Pumwana's Arid Dreams, which I enjoyed, which was a short story collection. This is also a short story collection. It's a coming of age collection, which is humorous and apparently flirts with sci-fi. So I'm looking forward to sampling that. Then in January, I hauled 10 and haven't read 2 of them. One of them, again, is a non-fiction book that I bought for research, so it's going back on the shelf, and that is Bedlam, London and It's Mad by Catherine Arnold. I think I bought this when I went shopping with lots of other booktubers, and I think I purchased it at the British Library Bookshop. Maybe. I also purchased Careful Mountain by Sarah June Woods, which is her second collection and is a follow-up collection to her book, Sara or the Existence of Fire, which I absolutely loved. So I'm looking forward to having the excuse to delve into that one. Then in February, there was one book out of 16 that I hadn't read, and that is Memoirs of a Polar Bear by Yoko Tawada, and it's translated from the Japanese by Susan Bonofsky. And I remember being super excited by this one. Then I remember seeing not very good reviews of it, and so it just kept getting further and further back on my TBR. But I've since read another pamphlet by Yoko Tawada published by Strangers Press, and I really liked it. I just think maybe her writing is very surreal and strange, and that is of course not to everyone's tastes, but it's definitely to my taste. So I'm glad to be reminded of this, and we shall be reading some of it. Then, where are we up to? We are up to March. March, I hauled 16 books and haven't read 2 of them, and those 2 were Foreign Soil by Maxine Beneba Clarke. This is a short story collection, but I'm not going to be reading the beginning of this in this video because I have a whole other video planned for short story collections that have been sitting on my shelf for a while, and I did do a video about that, which I'll link in the description box down below. I was clearing out my shelves and I made a pile of short story collections that I wanted to do try a story from. This is one of them. There's also, I think, at least one more short story collection in this pile. 2. There are 2 that are also going to go in this pile for a separate video. And the other book from that month is Angela Carter's The Infernal Desire Machines of Dr. Hoffman. I think I must have read around this time, because we have 2 other Angela Carter books in this pile. I must have read the biography of Angela Carter by Edmund Gordon, which I and the other judges who were judging the Somerset Maugham Prize that year awarded the Somerset Maugham Prize. I just adored it, and I hadn't read Angela Carter's work since I was at university, I think, which would have been 7 years before I first bought these books, and I thought I really must read more of her books, and clearly bought a few and then didn't read all of them. So we have a few Angela Carter in here. This one says it is about an employee of the city that's under a bizarre reality attack from someone called Dr. Hoffman, who has made mysterious machines, including a beautiful woman made out of glass. I'm already excited to read the beginning of that. If I'm reading my list correctly, we're now in April 2017, where I bought 17 books and haven't read 2 of them. One of those is The Accusation by Bandi, which is a short story collection translated from the Korean by Deborah Smith, I think. Yes, that's right. And these are short stories that have come out of North Korea, so I'll be talking about those in the short story video. The other book from that month is called Mirror Shoulder Signal by Dorthe Nors, and it's translated from the Danish by Misha Hawkstra. I bought this because I was gifted a copy of So Much for That Winter by her from Max Porter, who loves her work, and I really fell in love with her writing, so I bought a couple more books. This one I haven't yet read. Then we get into May, and there are 3 books from May that I hadn't yet read out of 13, and this is where the 2 other Angela Carters come in. So this is The Passion of New Eve, and this is Heroes and Villains, and I'll talk about those when I read the beginning of them. And also this non-fiction book, which I remember being a booktube darling in 2017, probably even before that. It's Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty, who also has a YouTube channel. She works in a crematorium, and this is about her relationship with death, and I think it's supposed to be quite funny, but apparently I haven't had the urge to pick it up since purchasing it. Then in June, there was one book that I didn't read out of 16, and that's The Red Parts by Maggie Nelson. I'm guessing that maybe I read Bluets around that time, which I absolutely loved. I've since read The Argonauts by her, which I enjoyed, but not quite as much. So I think it is about time that I go back to her work. This is, it says it's the autobiography of a trial, so it's about the murder of her aunt, who was called Jane. Then July, yeah, so the first one is a novel, and this is translated from the Spanish by Megan McDowell. It's called Seeing Red by Lina Meruane, and it's a novel based on her real experiences of sight loss. And I haven't read it because that's a sensitive topic for me as someone with deteriorating eyesight, but I really think that I'm ready to read this now. So that one is one I will be sampling. There were 2 from that month that are going to be either going back in the shelf or going in that short story video. One of them is a non-fiction book called Transgressive Tales, Queering the Grimms, edited by Kay Turner and Pauline Greenhill. And you know I'm always here for queering fairy tales. So this one is going back on the shelf because I bought it for research. And this short story collection I'll talk about in the short story video, which is Getting It in the Head by McCormack. And the final book from that month was We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed with Our Families by Gourevitch. This is kind of an oral history of stories from Rwanda during the genocide, well, after the genocide, but by people who experienced it. And he went around the country interviewing people, collecting stories to put this book together. And obviously that is a very, very, very heavy book. In August, I bought 10 books and haven't read this one. Can you tell why I haven't read it? Yeah, it's huge. The font is teeny tiny, and also the premise makes me nervous. So this is The Grey House by Mariam Petrosyan, translated from the Russian by Yuri and Mashkasov. I don't think this is an Own Voices disabled book. I've done lots of research. I've tried to find out. If anyone else knows, please let me know. I don't think it is. But the premise is great because it's about a group of disabled kids who live in a place called the Grey House, which is this house that hovers in the sky. But the blurb makes me nervous, and that could be the translation. It could be someone working at the publishing company. It may not be the writer herself at all, but it says The Grey House is an astounding tale of how what others understand as liabilities can be leveraged into strengths. Bound to wheelchairs and dependent on prosthetic limbs, the physically disabled students living in the house are overlooked by the outsides. So that language doesn't appeal to me, and I'll talk about that more when I read the beginning and we can discuss. But yeah, I just have a very busy brain when I think about this book. And then finally in September, there were 15 books that I hauled and 2 that I haven't yet read. So this is Travelling with Ghosts by Shannon Leone Fowler, and this is a non-fiction book about her discussing grief. So her fiance died when they were on holiday together. He was killed by a jellyfish, I think. Yeah, a box jellyfish. And she was training to be a marine biologist. So in this book, she travels around the world and she talks to other people about grief to try and contextualize her own. But I think there's also going to be stuff that deals with her study as a marine biologist. So that sounds really fascinating, but again, like a very heavy topic, and probably why I haven't picked it up yet. And then finally, this is Tangleweed and Brine by Deirdre Sullivan, and this is a collection of fairy tale retellings. I think it's YA, and that's probably why I haven't got to it yet. I'm very keen to read her adult fiction too, which I have sitting on my shelf. So once I have discarded the books that are going back on my shelf because I bought them for research or are being put to one side for that short stories video, I have 14 books that I'm going to read the beginning of now. Either the first story if it's a short story collection, or roughly the first chapter if it's not. And then I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to rank them. We're going to put them in an order. I'll tell you which ones I am still really excited to get to. And you can let me know if you've read any of these as well and what your thoughts are. So I'll be back in what will be just 1 second for you. Hello. Time has passed and I have organised books roughly into piles in front of me. I have to say that reading 14 books one after the other just the very beginning was a surreal experience because the books kind of started to bleed into each other. It was odd. Anyway, there were 5 books out of that 14 that I absolutely loved the beginning of and found it really difficult to put down. And then there were 3 that I really very much enjoyed. Then there were some that it's not that I wasn't sure about them, but I didn't feel the tug of, oh my goodness, I want to read this right now. I thought those could happily sit on my shelf for longer and I really wouldn't mind. And then there's one book I think I'm going to part ways with, and another one that I am really not sure about, but I want to read more of first. So shall we begin at the lower end and then work up to the ones that I really loved? The book that I'm definitely going to part ways with is Heroes and Villains by Angela Carter. I think she's trying to do something interesting, but it's a social satire novel about race and it just made me feel uncomfortable. If I'm going to read a social satire novel about race, I'm probably not going to go to a white perspective from the 1960s, you know? It's just not going to be my first port of call. And there are other books of hers that I would like to read. So I think this one, no, I'm going to part ways with. The one that I'm not sure about is the one that I knew I would have bit of a conundrum with. So that is The Grey House, which is the book about disability that I was speaking about before. The premise, amazing. The language on the blurb, which may or may not be the author's, such as wheelchair bound, is very jarring. It implies a lack of understanding when it comes to disability and linguistics, which is super important, especially when mobility aids are access and freedom and should be celebrated. The beginning of this book, I feel like I have to keep making excuses for it. I have to find reasons for why things that make me uncomfortable might be in there. So the main character seems to have a lot of self-hatred and internalized ableism. They say that if you saw the true form of all the disabled people, they would be hags. They all have hags hiding inside them. And that feeds into that disability, disfigurement, villainy trope, which is poison. So I don't know if the main character just has self-hatred and that's something that's explored throughout the novel. Possibly, but that's an excuse I have to make. And he also calls other people's disabilities disgusting. So I didn't enjoy that. The house itself is amazing because it seems to grow and be very magical as if it's a character in the book itself. I really liked that. The main character is also told off because they get some trainers, some bright trainers, and they're told off for drawing attention to their disability because they can't walk. And they say, well, why are you wearing bright shoes? If you can't walk, it just makes us look bad because you're highlighting the fact that you're disabled, and that's wrong. Again, this may be something that is discussed later and shown to be not okay, but I don't know. I'm only going on what I've read so far combined with the blurb, plus also reviews I've seen, and I've only seen reviews from non-disabled people. If anyone has seen a review from a disabled person, I would love, love, love to listen to that discourse. The reviews that I've seen a lot from non-disabled people about this book are that they love it because it's not really about disability. And every time I hear that, I want to like scream internally because it's a book about all disabled characters. Oh, but thank God it's not actually about disability, right? Because that would be awful. What reviewers mean is that they're able to forget about the fact that the characters are disabled and just mentally put them back to what their default is, which is a non-disabled protagonist who's going through a story. That shouldn't be our default. That shouldn't be what we expect of characters. And it's fine to make a book be about disability when it's all about disabled characters. So I don't think that that's something that I personally would want to celebrate. And basically the conversations surrounding it make me feel like when I see non-disabled people getting really excited about geek love and not thinking about it from a disabled point of view, but more seeing disability as a metaphor for something else or a fun thing for an author to play with because it's so weird and esoteric. And I'm all for weird and esoteric, especially with disabled characters as protagonists. But alongside the magical, if disability is not a real thing, as in I can believe that these characters are disabled and are navigating this world through their disabled bodies, then the whole thing disintegrates for me. I don't think it's weird or quirky to have disabled characters, and when that's the only perspective that is offered, either in review form or in the book itself, it makes me very frustrated. So, did I talk enough about that? I am undecided. I'm undecided. The language in various places is amazing, is awful in other places. So I may push through. Maybe all of those things I've been making excuses for will be changed and critiqued. I have no idea, but this is my gut feeling right now. It makes me feel uncomfortable. So we shall see. Moving on to books that I enjoyed, but as I said, I didn't feel that pull of, oh my God, I must read them right now. So the first one is Tangleweed and Brine by Deirdre Sullivan, a collection of YA fairy tale retellings. It's got some black and white plates in. I read the first story, which is called Slippershod, which is a Cinderella retelling, and it was okay. I didn't feel like it offered anything hugely new. There was a twist at the end, which was nice, but the rest felt a bit too predictable for me personally. But maybe the rest of the stories in this collection will be different. And as I said, I am very, very excited to read her adult fiction. So I will definitely get to this at some point. Had to pause to recharge my camera battery. Also realised the camera was zoomed in, so sorry if I was a bit closer than usual. The next book that I read the beginning of is this non-fiction book called We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed with Our Families by Philip Gourevitch. So this is the oral history of the Rwandan genocide. And I think I bought this off the back of reading Creating Freedom by Raul Martinez, which is a wonderful book, and part of that looks at the world's reaction to the Rwandan genocide and what political leaders did or indeed didn't do. The introduction of this book basically called me out, because the introduction is all about how human brains find it difficult to comprehend horrific things like this, because our brain just goes, I can't contextualize that. That's too horrible. That's too terrible. I don't understand why something like that would happen. And obviously it's very important to contextualize these things, which is why I think that Creating Freedom is so great, because it looks at the, as I said, the wider global reaction and why that is troubling, and why certain things are not allowed to happen in other countries, but why something as horrific as this can feel so far removed because of the way it's talked about afterwards, I think is what I mean to say. So if you haven't read Creating Freedom, I really recommend it. But this obviously zooms in and looks at the experiences of the people who survived the Rwandan genocide, talking about it. And obviously that is a really difficult thing to read. That's not an excuse not to read it, but that's why it has been sitting on my shelf. So I've only read the introduction of this, but it was one that was in the pile of books that I enjoyed. Obviously you need to use all the air quotes with that. It's a well-written text. There were two other books that I felt similarly towards, in that, yes, I still want to read them, but I don't think I'm going to read them right this second. And that is The Passion of New Eve by Angela Carter. This beginning didn't grab me, but it feels like it's going to be playing on Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and that it's going to be exploring gender and performance. And you can probably tell that by the cover as well. So I think this is going to be a bit of a queer love story, and I'm definitely intrigued by that, but the writing style I don't think was her strongest. And then the beginning of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty did make me giggle, and I found the tone of it really endearing, but again, it didn't feel like a book that I need to get to right now. I don't think that my interest in this is going to particularly wane, so that's going to go back on my shelf. It's about her time working in a crematorium, and it opens with the first time she ever had to shave someone who had died. So if you don't want to read about death in any way, shape or form, that book is definitely not for you. And the introduction definitely states that as well. I would say also that she writes about a lot of things very matter-of-factly, including people exposing themselves to her on the street. And she's dealing with that in a very forthright kind of way, but that also can be an uncomfortable thing obviously to read about, so I just wanted to mention that too. Then we have three books that I enjoyed a lot. So this is Seeing Red by Lina Meringue, and this is a book by a Chilean author, and as I said, it's a novel that is inspired by her experiences of sight loss. And the beginning of this book is super claustrophobic because she's at a party and lots of people are drunk. I should say the main character's at a party, Lucina. Lucina is at a party and everyone is drunk, and she doesn't want to ruin the mood of the party, but excuse me, but there's like blood leaking into my eye and I can't really see. But she doesn't really feel like she can tell people that. There's a horrible like disability humor to that, in the, oh my God, I don't want to be an inconvenience to you, but I think I'm going blind right now. So a doctor had told her that this might happen at some point in the future, and she'd always thought, oh, well, it's probably not going to happen to me. We all know that feeling. And then she's at this party and it starts to happen like very rapidly, and she finds it really difficult to articulate. She's stumbling because she can't see very well, but people just think that she's drunk. So that's the beginning of the book. I thought it was a very good opening scene. I thought the writing was fantastic. Then I realised why this one has been sitting on my shelf for a long time. I remembered this is The Red Parts by Maggie Nelson, which, as I said, is a non-fiction book talking about the murder of her aunt, who was called Jane. And the reason I hadn't read it yet is because I had read the introduction before, or the preface, which I've read again in this exercise. And Maggie's talking about how she was just about to publish Jane, a Murder, which was a poetry collection talking about the death of her aunt, which was decades ago, and the killer had never been caught, when, right before publication, a police officer called her and said, we've been investigating this again for the last 5 years. I didn't want to get your hopes up, which is why we didn't tell you, but we're about to make an arrest. And she's just really emotional about it. I nearly cried when I was reading the beginning, really emotional, because the police officer said to her, I bet you feel like you've been doing this on your own, you know, when she was writing this other book about her aunt. I bet you feel like you've been writing that and investigating it on your own. And she said, yes, I have. And he said, well, you haven't. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. So the reason I haven't read this yet is because I want to read Jane a Murder first, because she wrote that first. And that is also on my shelf, but I bought that more recently. So I need to read that, and then I can read this. And then I read the beginning of, I just hit myself with this, Mirror Shoulder Signal by Dorthe, translated from the Danish by Misha Hoekstra. And I think with Dorthe writing, there's a great sense of detachment with it, and sometimes I really like that and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I read her and I think she's a little bit like a Danish Sally Rooney, maybe because their characters hold themselves back quite a lot, whilst at the same time appearing to be quite, for want of a better word, vulnerable. She is, if I'm reading this extended metaphor correctly, she is learning how to drive because she wants to gain freedom in her life, but she doesn't know what direction she wants to go in. So the beginning of this book is her being told which direction to go in as she does a driving lesson. So I enjoy that literary device. That's fun. Her driving instructor is rather xenophobic. I don't get the impression we're supposed to agree with them. It was a very short chapter, so I don't really have anything else to report. It wasn't one of the 5 favourite books that I read in this experiment, but it nearly was. Then, the 5 favourite books and ones that I'm itching to read, but I also have other books that I need to read right now, so I'm probably not going to read them imminently, but let's say soon. I read, well actually I probably could read this one because it's so short. This is Careful Mountain by Sarah June Woods. As I said, her first collection was called Sara or the Existence of Fire, and it's such a magical, surreal childhood retelling, and it's gifting herself this childhood that she didn't have as a trans woman, so rewriting her magical girlhood, and it's a joy. This is a follow-up to that, and again, it is so surreal. It also is thematically and narratively linked, which I like. The first poem is called I Keep Waking Up to Lakes, and talks about how everything in the world is turning into lakes. I don't know if it's a commentary on things being fluid. I'll have to find out the more that I read. But the second poem has these 2 stanzas in, which are just stunning. Our wedding was beautiful, with all its speckled flowers. All the people were dressed up like deer, and all the deer were dressed up like box elders, and all the box elders were dressed up like people, and all our feelings were dressed up like the feelings of the people we wished we were instead. It was officiated by a magnificent lake, whose words were dressed up like whole families so small you could hold them under your tongue to help you sleep at night. Basically, her work fills my head with images and just makes me very excited about writing in general. This next book, Travelling with Ghosts by Shannon Leone Fowler, is probably the one that I found the hardest to put down. I immediately wanted to read all of this book. This, as I said, is a book about her being a marine biologist, her fiance being killed by a box jellyfish, and then her travelling around the world because she used to travel a lot with her partner, and discussing grief with other people. The chapters so far are really, really short. So she's focusing on, I would say, acute memories. And the writing itself is very reminiscent of Maggie O'Farrell's I Am, which obviously explores very similar things. That is also a book about grief and near misses of death as well as death itself. I loved Memoirs of a Polar Bear by Yoko Tawada. It's so weird in a great way. So the blurb says it's about 3 bears, and ridiculous me, I had assumed that these would be bears that could think and perhaps talk to themselves in the world that we know. That's not what it is. So it's bears, or at least not the first bear in this book. The first bear is a bear that used to be in a circus and now works in a company and goes to meetings with other people, and is reminiscing on their childhood and how they used to get picked on at school for being a bear and being different amongst all the humans. It's just really, really weird in the best way possible, and I'm enjoying that. And speaking of weird, this is also weird. This is The Infernal Desire Machines of Dr. Hoffman by Angela Carter. I hadn't put 2 and 2 together with regards to the Hoffman in this book, but having read the beginning, I'm pretty sure that the Hoffman in this is supposed to be a magical, imagined version of E.T.A. Hoffman, who was around several hundred years ago and loved folklore and magical creation over science, or as an answer to science, and wrote The Nutcracker and Coppelia. So really liked stories that bring inanimate objects to life, and that's what this creator does in this book. It says on the back that he creates Albertina, a beautiful woman made of glass. who only seems to appear to him in dreams. I think maybe this Dr. Hoffman may have put people under a spell or enchantment of some kind, because it says, the minister sent the determination police round to break all the mirrors because of the lawless images they were disseminating. Since mirrors offer alternatives, the mirrors had all turned to fissures or crannies in the hitherto hard-edged world of here and now, and through these fissures came slithering sideways all manner of amorphous spooks. And it's giving me Return to Oz vibes, which is definitely a good thing. And the only thing I will say about these editions of Angela Carter is that the fonts are always really, really small, which is another reason why they've sat on my shelf for so long. And the final book that I read and absolutely loved the beginning of was The Sad Part Was by Prabda Yoon, translated from the Thai by Mui Popsicle. And I read the first story in here called Pen in Parentheses. It's about a man who finds a note he'd written to himself when he was a kid that just said, I will never change. And as a grown-up, he can't fathom what his childhood self was trying to cling to. So he starts rummaging through his own memories to work out what he loved about being that age. He talks about how his grandparents brought him up because his parents had died, and how his grandfather was obsessed with old films and would hang a sheet above the door or across the wall to project films onto, especially Dracula, and it would be silent films because they didn't have any speakers. So his grandma would do a soundtrack by playing classical music. The whole story is concerned with different ideas of projection, projecting films being the literal one, but then more abstract versions of that, like projecting your memory of someone onto a certain situation. He talks about different kinds of reviving. So when his grandfather died, he says that his soul went into his grandmother's body and was almost reincarnated that way. As a grown-up, he goes into advertising and makes his own film using Dracula, the memory he has of Dracula, to promote breath mints, and he sends it to his grandmother to say, look, I remember all those things that you showed me when I was little, and this is me cherishing that and using it in a grown-up way in my world now. But his grandmother can't really remember what he remembers, and so it makes little sense to her. So it's the gap between their memories of both of those things and how sad that can be. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the 14 books that I decided to read the beginning of. Now, as I said, I'm itching to read the ones at the top of that pile. And then the ones that were at the bottom, there was one, as I said, I'm definitely going to part ways with, and I'm going to ruminate on the others and see if I want to keep them, perhaps read a bit more and make a decision later. There is no rush. I don't mind books staying on my shelf for a long period of time. I'm just curious to see how our tastes change as time passes, and whether our relationships with books that we've bought then also changes. It's fun. I would love to know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. Thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Check out the link at the top of the description box down below. If you're new to my channel and you would like to subscribe, that would be lovely. And if you like my content and would like to support me on Patreon, that is also lovely. Links, as always, in the description box down below. I hope you're all doing okay, and I will speak to you very soon. Sending lots of love. Bye.